So this is the day 2 notes. We're going to solve triangles using trig. So we're going to be using SOHCAHTOA again. This time we're just going to have different types of, or I guess a little bit more complicated ones. I don't know if that's the right word, but a little different than yesterday. So let's start with this first one. We've got 64 degrees for our angle, and then 25 is one of the sides and x is the other side. So first step we always do is we identify what two sides we're working with. So the x is the hypotenuse. So I'm just going to write HYP next to x. There we go. And then the 25 is across from the angle, so that is the opposite side. So that tells me we're going to be working with sine because it's opposite and hypotenuse. So to set this up, I'm going to do sine of 64 equals opposite, which is 25, divided by hypotenuse, which is x. All right, so now we're going to go to our calculator. We're going to go sine of 64. Remember, make sure your mode is in degree mode. It is from last time. So sine 64 degrees. And I get 0.899 if I round it. Oops. So yesterday, or on the previous notes, what we did was we would multiply what's on the bottom, and we can do that as well here. So I'm going to multiply by x. It's not going to solve it for us, but we're going to end up with x times 0.899 equals 25. And then to solve for x, we're going to divide by 0.899. So this one basically just requires an extra step. You got to get rid of what's in the bottom. In this case, it's x, and then you divide by whatever that sine of 64 is. So we're going to do, sorry, I already forgot, 25 divided by that number. So I'm going to do 25 divided by, and then second enter, excuse me, wrong one. 25 divided by second negative sign will take that previous answer. So this way I'm not rounding at all. I'm not typing in 0.899. I'm using that previous number. That'll give me a more accurate answer. So that would be 27.82 if I round it. So the hypotenuse on this would be 27.82 inches or feet or whatever the units are. Okay, so kind of similar to the previous day's lesson. The next one's going to be a little bit different, but once again, review from what we did in geometry. So our angle this time we don't know. That's x degrees, but the 25 is across from there, so that's the opposite. And the 14 is next to it, so that's going to be adjacent. So if we're dealing with opposite and adjacent, that tells me I'm going to be using tangent. You notice I always write out SOHCAHTOA and then just kind of identify which one I'm going to use. So if it's tangent, we're going to do tangent of the angle, which is x, equals opposite divided by adjacent. So 25 divided by 14. That 5 is a little ugly. Let me fix that. Okay. So this time, what we want to do is we want to get rid of that tangent. Now, it's kind of tempting to want to divide by tangent, but that's not how it works. Tangent is an operator. You can't divide by an operator. So what we're going to do instead, I'm going to rewrite the problem here. I'm going to give myself a little bit of room. Is we're going to take the inverse of both sides. So tangent inverse. So to cancel out tangent, you do tangent inverse. And so then what's left on the left is x degrees equals, and then we just type that into our calculator, tangent inverse of 25 over 14. So that would be second tangent 25 divided by 14, and we get 60.75. So in this case, the angle was 60.75 degrees. So this is kind of the only really new thing, is that if you're solving for an angle, you have to use the inverse to find that missing angle. Okay, so let's got a couple more examples we're going to run through. And this one says solve this triangle, which means find all the sides and angles. So in this one, we have two of the sides, but we don't know any of the angles other than that 90-degree angle. So what I can do is, if I want to find what angle A is, we'll say this one right here, then I can identify what those two sides are in relation to A. So 24 is across, so that would be opposite. 66 is next to it, so that would be adjacent. So that means I'm going to be using tangent to find that missing angle. So I'm going to set this up by doing tangent of A equals 24 divided by 66. And then if I want to solve for A, I'm going to take the tangent inverse of both sides. So we'll do tangent inverse of that side and tangent inverse of that side. And when I do that, I get A equals, and then I'm just going to do tangent inverse of 24 divided by 66. And I get 19.98. All right, so I'm going to get rid of a little bit of stuff here that's in my way. So this angle here would be 19.98 degrees. And then we're just going to use what we know about triangles. We know that all three angles add up to 180. So if I take 1998 plus 90, I get 109.98. And then if I just subtract that from 180, I'm going to get, let's see, I'll just use a calculator. I don't want to make a mistake on the video. So 180, let's see, we'll add 90 here. And then we'll do 180 and subtract that number. And I get 70.02. So this angle up here would be 70.02 degrees. Remember, it's just because the three angles have to add up to 180. It's true for any triangle. Okay, so then to figure out the hypotenuse, there's a bunch of different ways you could do it. You could use the Pythagorean theorem, so a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That would be 24 squared plus 66 squared equals x squared. Or you could use SOHCAHTOA again. And I want to do that, but the Pythagorean theorem works great here as well, so if you prefer to do that method, that's totally fine. So let's do angle C. And if we're going to use that angle, and you could use angle A, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to choose C. You can pick whichever angle you have. And we know that x is going to be the hypotenuse. That's the one we're trying to figure out. And then you can just pick one of these other two sides. So I'm going to pick the 24, and that's the adjacent. So if I'm working with hypotenuse and adjacent, that's going to be cosine. So I would do cosine of the angle, 70.02 degrees, equals adjacent divided by hypotenuse, 24 divided by x. So I have to go to my calculator, type in cosine of 70.02. I get 0.34 approximately. And then if you recall what we first talked about, we're going to multiply by x on both sides. And I get 0.34x equals 24. Those x's cancel out. And then I divide by 0.34. And I'll get my hypotenuse. So 24 divided by that. Second negative gives me 70.24. So the hypotenuse on this would be 70.24. And one thing that's always smart is to make sure that that number does make sense. And indeed it does, because the long leg is 66 and the hypotenuse has to be bigger. It looks like maybe it should be a little bit bigger, and indeed it is. It's just about 4.24 bigger. All right. So when it says solve the triangle, that means you have to figure out every missing side and every missing angle, and that's exactly what we did. All right, let's do one more. What I'd encourage you to do here is pause the video, try to do this one on your own, see if you can get all the missing sides and angles, and then once you're done with that, watch it and see if we got the same answers. All right, so this time I have A is 30 degrees, so C would be actually pretty easy to figure out, this one up here, because all three angles have to add up to 180. So if I just do 30 plus 90, that's 120. So if I take 180 minus 120, that's going to be 60 degrees. So up here is going to be 60 degrees. And then if I want to figure out the missing sides, you can use whichever trig function you want. So I'm going to call, whenever you're finding a side across from an angle, so if here's A, that opposite side we usually call lowercase a. So for the missing hypotenuse, since that's across from B, we're going to call that lowercase b. All right, so to figure out side A, you could use any trig function you want. I'm going to use angle A, that's 30, and A and 18. So let's identify these sides. So A would be opposite, 18 would be adjacent. So that tells me that we're going to use tangent for this one because it's opposite and adjacent. So we do tangent of 30 degrees equals opposite divided by adjacent. So let's type that into our calculator, tangent of 30, and I get 0.577. And then I'm going to multiply by 18 on both sides. Let's see, times 18, and I get 10.39. So this side here is 10.39. Okay, and then if we want to figure out what B is, I'm going to, let's see, erase these highlights here. I'm going to try to figure out B, and I'll use 30 again and 18 again. So this time, let's grab a new color. Let's do purple. B is the hypotenuse, and 18 is still the adjacent side because we're working with 30 degrees. So ADJ. So hypotenuse and adjacent tells me we're going to be doing cosine. So cosine of 30 degrees equals adjacent, 18, divided by hypotenuse, which is B. It's an ugly B. Let's do that again. That's better. Okay, so cosine of 30. Excuse me. 0.866. All right. And then we're going to multiply by B on both sides. So we get 0.866 times B equals 18. So then I'm going to divide by 0.866 on both sides. And what do we get? 18 divided by that. I get 20.78. So that tells me my hypotenuse is 20.78. We already got that one. All right. So once again, we're not doing anything drastically different. We're just doing multiple different problems within the same triangle to figure out all the missing sides. So that is it for day 2 notes.